The market continued its historic run last week on the backs of the Phase 1 trade deal being finalized. And in this week's video, we'll cover the Phase 1 trade deal, also the articles of impeachment being signed, as well as a possible bullish signal that we're seeing from the emerging markets.
The Russell 2000 led the way last week, up over 2.5%, and the NASDAQ was also up over 2%, while the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones were both up almost 2% last week. And just like last year, the NASDAQ leads the way for this year so far, up almost 5% for the year. Foreign and emerging markets were up both about 1.4% last week, and now foreign markets are up about 1.3%, while emerging markets are up 3% year to date. The chart that we're looking at today is of the emerging markets. If you look at the blue line going through the middle of the chart, that's the breakout level for emerging markets, right around 1160. And we saw emerging markets break out above that line back in December of last year. And then a few weeks ago, we saw a back test, and then emerging markets continued higher. Now, the emerging markets just made a new 52-week high, but they're still well off the all-time highs, unlike the US markets. Also, emerging market valuations are cheaper than in the US, so as long as we continue to see a risk-on type of environment, we could see more money flowing into the emerging markets.
Last week, the Phase 1 trade deal was officially signed between the US and China. Now, there weren't really any surprises as the deal was signed as expected. China agrees to buy an additional $200 billion worth of goods from the US over the next 2 years. There's going to be reductions of tariffs, but 2/3 of the tariffs still remain. Since we're on the topic of things being signed, Nancy Pelosi signed the articles of impeachment last week with her commemorative bullet pens and delivered them to the Senate. It's important to note that President Trump is hoping to have this trial wrapped up before February 4th, which is his State of the Union address, and he wants to focus on what he's going to do for his second term. The Senate trial is set to begin Tuesday this week. Now, dovetailing off of Jared's emerging markets chart, the IMF released their global outlook for 2020. They actually changed their outlook from the past couple of years as they were talking about a possibility of a global recession, but now they're expecting global growth to remain right around 3.3%. And lastly, earnings season kicked off last week with the big banks reporting, and most of them beat analyst expectations. And one resounding theme throughout all of the conference calls from the big banks is that they are so excited about how strong the US consumer is.
This week, we have the Davos World Economic Forum, as well as around 10% of the S&P 500 reporting their earnings.
Thanks for watching, and please subscribe to our channel. Also, please check out our video on how the 2020 election could impact the stock market.